Okay, so Naso and Balescha. So here again, just to recap what we mentioned already a few times, that the Rebbe Nishma is out to explain what we came across in the second Maamar, that after the explanation in the first Maamar how the Esakech Sanefesh are behislabshus in the Ivorei Aguf, so there is a young benimshul that the Esa Oiris of the spheres are behislabshus in the Kelim of Atzilus, hislabshus primis. And all the klole hislabshus which he spoke about in the Moshel continue in the Nimshul until we come to one point which needed clarification. And that is that in the Moshel of Keiches HaNefesh we say that the Esa Keiches are Pnimiyim Be'etzim. How do you explain that Maamar? The Inyan of Pnimiyim Be'etzim. And that's what he started off to explain, and this is where we're coming back to answer the question is in this Maamar. In order to answer that question, the Rebbe Shmuel prefaced a shaila, a stira l'cha'ira, that on the one hand, we're talking about keiches which are oiris hamislabshim and kelim da'atzilus. So we're talking about oirim ha'atzilus. Atzilus is yesh miyayin or gilui helam? That was the question. If we're talking about if it's pnimiyim be'etzim, so where did the pnimiyim start? Where did the hislabshus begin? So we have to work out the yachas of Atzilus to higher to its mocker. So is Atzilus gilui helam or yesh miyayin? That was the question. So in the previous Maamar, the Rebbe Shmuel did the first answer would be that it depends if we're talking about Oiris, so we're talking about Kelim. If we're talking about Kelim, they are Be'ein Aroich, and he was Meirich how they're Be'ein Aroich, that his harvest is B'derech Richuk, say the Rishimus, say his harvest B'poil, which would mean how their nets are from the Kav through the Hakon, through the Moshlevis Neitutzes, etc. So all these things are explaining how Kelim are B'bechinis Richuk, B'bechinis Ein Aroich. That doesn't mean to say that the Kelim are not also part of Oirim HaAtzilus. They're still part of Atzilus because they are Elokus. It's a Yesh Miyayin, but it's not a Yesh Nivra, it's a Yesh Ne'etzal. So the Kelim are Elokus, but they're Bebechinis Richot, therefore they are referred to as Yesh Miyayin. Masha'inkin Oiris, Oiris Abaderech Hisgalus. The Oiris come from the Kav, and the Kav comes from Oir and Sof, so they are a Gilui Helam from the beginning until you get to Atzilus. So that would explain the answer. Yesh Miyayin goes on the Kelim, Atzilus, Gilui Helam is going on the Oiris. In this Maamar, the Rebbe Shmuel goes further, and he says you can't stop there. You can't say that the Yesh Miyayin of Atzilus is only the Kelim, because the Pashtus Haloshon of Chochma Ayin Tilmatza means that the Chochma, the whole Chochma, not just the Kli of Chochma, the whole Chochma is Yesh Miyayin, including the Oir. So how are you going to explain that? How do you explain that the Oir is also a Bechina of Yesh Miyayin? So the Rebbe Shmuel is going to prove that although the Oiris of Atzilus come from the Kav, and the Kav comes from Oir and Sof, that doesn't mean that the Oiris of Atzilus are totally pshitas. Now let's just be prefaced. Everybody knows that there's a few shittas benegay to the spheres. If the Oiris of the spheres have it tziyu or they don't have it tziyu. And I said a few times before that the dogish in this Hemshech is to try and prove the Ikka, the shitta, that the Oiris do have it tziyu. And it begins in this Maamar. To prove that the Oiris do have it tziyu, that means even before they came into the Kelim, there's already an Oir HaChesed and an Oir HaGvura. It just becomes more apparent when it comes into the Kelim. But it already has the Tziyah even before it comes into the Kelim. And the question will be, so where did this start, this Tziyah? If the Oiris come from the Kav and the Kav come from Oir and Sof, so when did the Tziyah begin? And this is what he's going to address over here. That the Oiris have to be, we're going to have to say that the Oiris themselves are not Pshutim Legamri. Either Sefer Yitzirah says, Esesphiris B'li Ma. B'li Ma means they don't have any Tziyah. Says the Rebbe, it's not like that. It doesn't mean they're Pshitas Legamri. B'li Ma is relative. Relative to what? Relative to Kelim. They're Pshitas Legamri the Kli, but they're not Pshitas completely. And to prove that, this is where Perek Yud Beis begins. The first proof is because we find that there are Oiris protiyim, even without kelim. If you're going to say that, in other words, like this, we all know the moshel of the powders, right? The mayim in the kli zchuchas. If you have water in the keli, the water remains pshitus, and the keli has a color, so you see green water, red water, but it's all the keli, the glass, not the actual water. That means to say that the mayim inside the kli, even now that you see it as green, is really inside its mayim pshutim. That's not a correct moshel to where we're going. We want to say that the oil is pshitas before it becomes into the kli. Be'erech to the kli it's pshitas, but when it comes into the kli, it does change and become the tziyah of the kli. Again, because we're going according to the shita that the oiris hamishlabshim bekelim themselves have a tziyah. They are made for particular kelim, or in the lashon of the mashal, the koiches are pnimim be'etzem. So the oiris are pnimim be'etzem. They have a shayches to tziyah, and the keli is what makes it more pronounced, the tziyah, but they already have a tziyah beforehand. What's one of the obvious proofs that it brings right at the beginning? The oiris themselves have a tziyah. The first example would be, we find madregas where there's no kelim, and there's still esa oiris. Go to Atik, there's no kelim. He says, Ein Elikim Imodi is going on Atik, there's no kelim, and nevertheless you have esa spheres. You go higher, you go to Akudim, same thing. What's the lashon Akudim? Esa oiris bekli echad. Kli echad, so how do you get esa oiris? Is a raya that the oiris themselves already have a ischalkus. So we have already ischalkus. Then he says an interesting lashon in the next kete on page Chavov, in the new print that is. That would be Yud in the old print in the middle. He starts off a shtickle, it's just interesting to know, he starts off Ube Emes. Ube Emes im hoye ha'oiris bebechinas blikvul mamish, lo hoye efsheli is klal islapshus oiris bekelim. Right? And when he finishes the sif, almost by the end, the last 3 lines on page Chav Zayin, he says, "V'gam ha'emes eid la'atzmoi." Again, emes. It's interesting. What would emes be? Well, it's a difficult question, but what would it seem? Be'emes, you're going to have to say, what's that? This lashon be'emes. So I would like to suggest that it's going based on what we said right at the beginning. You obviously remember the very first time we started the Hemshech, that one of the yesodus of Chassidus Bechlal and the Rebbe was saying in Ayin Beis Bifrat is that everything has to make sense. It has to be Beseder V'Hadraga. And therefore, it cannot be that an oil which has absolutely no tziyah and its bligvul lands in a keli which has a tziyah. How does this pshitas and bligvul land in a keli which has a tziyah? It doesn't fit, it doesn't go together. And it's bifrat, like he brings down, it's muskim from chokrim, that you can't have bligvul inside gvul. So if the oil is mamish bligvul or mamish pshitas, how does it come inside a keli? Say the keli is like the moshel of the mayim would not really work. Talking about mayim bligvul inside a keli mugbul, and it takes on the tziyah of the kli. How did an oil bligvul come into a keli? Just like in nefesh, we said it doesn't work like that. The reason why the koyach ha-yad, the koyach ha-pnuah goes into the yad is because the yad is a keli to the koyach ha-pnuah, and the koyach ha-shmir goes into the ear because it's made for that. So the reason why an oil will go into the Kriya Chesed is because it is an Oil HaChesed. And that's where he goes in Ismailech a little bit on the Inyan of the Gvul of Kelim. And an interesting point over here is
Gvul of Kelim or Gvul of Oiris?
The Gvul of Kelim. Obviously to prove that the Oiris also have a Tziyu and have a Gvul. But first the Gvul of Kelim. You may remember from 2 years ago we had in Basel and Barichas that the Kelim of Atzilus are only called Koyach HaGvul. But here he emphasizes that there is an inyan of gvul. So just to explain one of the things in the middle, which I don't know if you have this nekuda, we say Atzilus is esesphiris she'ein lehem sof. So Atzilus is bligvul. Yeah, it's bligvul. Esesphiris she'ein lehem sof. Spashlis adein sof. So what are the kelim doing? The kelim are, according to this, to one way of explaining it, the kelim are only to be magbul that Atzilus shouldn't overflow into Biyah. To stop it, they shouldn't go into Biyah. So he says that itself is already a Hagbala. And here we see the difference between Oir Sof and the Ein Sof of Atzilus. So just to explain, let me ask a simple question. Where is Atzilus now? Just hypothetical. So most people say, it's here. That's what most Magadishans, right here. It just depends if you're on the Madrega, you feel it, which could be true. But then what you're saying is Atzilus is Ein Sof without any Hagbolas. And it's L'cha'ere, one should say, I'm not saying this definitely, but I'm saying L'cha'ere, one should say Atzilus is not here. This is Olam HaAsiyah. We're in Olam HaAsiyah. If you want to go to Olam HaYitzira, you have to climb out of the Guf and go up there. And if you want to go to Bria, go higher. Atzilus is on the level of Atzilus. Obviously it's Madregas Ruchnis and it's not a Mokim Gashmi. But it's like saying, is the Svara of 2 + 2 = 4, is that found inside the table? Tables don't know about these things. It's not inside the table. It's an inyan on a Madrega of Seichel. In the Madrega of Midas, that Seichel is not there. On the Madrega of Doimim, that Seichel is not there. Seichel is on the Olam of Seichel. So is the Olam of Seichel also in the Olam of Midas? No, it's not. Is the Olam of Seichel also in the Olam of Doimim? No, it's not. If you're going in Mokim Gashmi, you could say, yeah, well, 2 + 2 = 4, even inside the table. Yeah, if you climb inside the table, the Sfara would not change, if you want to go like that. But if you're not talking about Mamish Geshem, then the Sfara is not in the Doimim. The Doimim does not know about such a thing. The Olam of Atzilus is an Olam as a Madrig, it's Ein Sof, but it's only on its level, on the level of Atzilus. It's not down here. And that's why the Kalim of Atzilus are there to block that the Gilui of Atzilus should not spill over into Biyah, because if there wouldn't be Kalim there, and Atzilus would come over to Olam HaBriya, or Olam HaBriya would become bottom like Atzilus. Ma'she'ein Kain, the Ein Sof of Ein Sof, is here. We don't feel it because it's Behelim, it's Seviv. But it's here. You could say, yes, it's here. Ein Sof HaSeviv is here. Atzilus is there, Ein Sof HaBligvul, which is higher, because it's the Emes HaBligvul, is right down here. So if we were to do like is Nofuts nowadays to make pictures, right? What picture would we do for Atzilus? We'd have to make some shape, whatever you want Atzilus to whatever shape. It would have to be over there on the map, and Bria would be there, and Yitzhak, and then Asiyah would be down at the bottom. But Oyer and Saf would be where? It would be surrounding all over the place. So just in case you're making pictures, you should remember that. It goes all over the place. So that, and he says that clearly over here. Looking inside, you want to see inside? He says, and then just before the end of page Yud Tes in the old thing, and it's in this page Chavov, the line begins, She'ein Sof Lispashtusum. He says, Ukanoida, Numbers 27. Ukanoida ha'hefresh ben ha'oren sof shelifna atzilus u'ben ha'oren sof sheba atzilus. The ha'oren sof shel ha'maylim atzilus hu shenimshech u'mispashet b'chol ha'olemus. All the way around. Ha'oren sof sheba atzilus hu shemispashet rak ba'atzilus loy chutz ba'atzilus. What happens if you want to give Atzilus and Biyah? Then you're going to have to come onto a Moifis. That was a special thing. There was a breaking through the barrier between Atzilus and Bria, and that was Kriyas Yamsuf. But otherwise, interesting, it says, number 30, surprise at the Maamar, it says, there's certain Shomas which they break through the barrier between Atzilus and Bria. Well, it's well known. They should have added on Hara 30 that in Tofshin Tezvov there's a Maamar of a Nigla Kved Avaya. There the Rebbe says, what type of neshamas are we talking about? That Nivka Leim HaParged, neshamas like the Ovis, neshamas of Moshe Rabbeinu, and the neshamas of Rabbi Seinu Siyeh. So Tofshin Tezvov and Nigla Kved Avaya. So you can add it on the Maamar Kemas. Yeah. So Akaponim, what comes out that there is some type of Hagbala in Atzilus, that means the Kalim are doing something. So if, and obviously since the Inyan of Chesed, Gvul and Tiferes, all these Shiurim are Vada in Kalim, so then once again we come to the Kushayna, so how would Oyer and Sof HaPoshut, Bli Ma, Pshitus, be Mislabish in a Kalim? So obviously the Oyer is not Poshut Lagamri. Obviously the Oyer has Epis Shaykhas with the Inyan of Tzir, and therefore it can be Mislabish and a Kli. That is just Be'ikah to prove that there must be a Tzir in the Oyers. Then in Pei Yud Gimel it goes on to prove it another way.
What's this Koyach HaGvul exactly?
Koyach HaGvul? Koyach HaGvul is the Reshima, the Sheirish HaKelim.
Well, remember we say that the Kelim that
you mean this? You mean
yes.
this technically? Okay. What do you mean Koyach HaGvul? Well, you remember the Bas Ligana from 2 years ago?
No.
He gives a moshel, the moshel of the hand. When you write one word, so you write one letter, the Sefer writes one letter, he's being mugbal his hand, right? He's only writing one letter. Does that mean he can only write letter? He's not mugbal, he can only write one letter? It's the koyach in his hand is restricting the arm to move up till here, one letter. Does that mean his koyach hatnua in his hand became mugbal? No, even while he's writing one letter, it's only lamaisa, he's allowing onto the paper one word. But he's not mugbal, it's only a koyach hagvul. His koyach hatnua is the same bli gvul as it was before. It's only as regards to what's outside of the hand. What he's saying over here is, sof kosof, that itself, that you're able to be magbal, that only one letter is being written on the paper, means that there is a hagbola, the Lashon is over here, there is some type of hagbola in the hand. What line was that?
It starts blikvul, like 6 lines.
Yes. So there is some type of hagbola. So Atzilus definitely has kelim which are mugbolim, and if the oiris are mislabshim the kelim, we're going to have to say that the oiris also have some type of tzil. We call them pshitus and blima. That's all biyachas to the keli. But be'emerson, ha'emes eil atzma, we're going to be'emerson. We're going to have to say, but why? What's the yisoid? The yisoid is what we said right at the beginning, because it has to make sense. How does this oil go into this kli? It has to make sense. Just like the koyach hariyah has to go into the eye because there's some connection over there. There's a pnimistic connection. Is if the oil chesed is if oil poshet going into chesed, why should you go into chesed? What's the connection? The connection is because he has a shaykhus to get the chesed, and therefore he's looking for a keli which has the same idea as him, and therefore there will be mislabshus pnimis.
In regards to what you were saying before about Atzilus being here and not here, then Lashon Maamar is b'chdishia gilu Atzilus b'biyah.
If you want the gilu Atzilus b'biyah, would be a moifus of kriyas yamsuf. That's not the norm.
No, yeah, but if you're saying can be like based off what he says b'chdishia gilu Atzilus.
If you want a gilu Atzilus, it's a moifus. It's not the normal thing.
Meaning that it could be there, but Atzilus b'biyah could be in the kilo same place. Just mitzat the gil, if you wanted to be begoli and be
it's a moifus. That's not I'm talking about seder hishtalshlus. And seder hishtalshlus Atzilus stops. There's a parasa adkan, and now there's a ha'ora of Atzilus. Obviously, there's a ha'ora of Atzilus. You need a lakus to be mahava oilemus biyah, but it's a ha'ora mitzuntemes which goes through the parasa and creates the oilemus biyah. But Atzilus proper, Atzilus on its own, is not in biyah.
Atzilus on its own in a revealed way.
It doesn't say Atzilus is in Bria, Elam HaBria Behelam. Atzilus is Atzilus, and that's it. And if you want to come down, it stops. A parsa stops. Right?
So when we see the neshamas, which are neshamas of Atzilus down here, that would be Begeder Nes.
It's similar to Kriyas Yamsuf, yeah. You're making a nesham which doesn't belong here, come down here.
What's the difference between Atzilus, why Dafka Atzilus, the Kalim are being magbul from... In other words, if there wasn't Kalim of Atzilus, the area of Atzilus would
be all over the place. Yeah.
All over the place, and if it would be all over the place, then it would be bittul of the Seder. Mashenkin didn't say for saying that's all over the place and there's no bittul of...
Well, that's because it's Behel.
So, in other words, what's the difference between...
What's the difference between Mamish? Well, Atzilus...
Saying, in other words, seemingly it's the same thing.
You're talking about the consequences. I'm not discussing consequences. I'm discussing the what level is over here. Is Atzilus down here? You can't say Atzilus is over here.
Why can't you say it's down here, Bell?
Because it isn't. It's just the fact. Atzilus is not here. Unless, if you're talking about Avodah, for example, a tzaddik, one of these tzaddikim was Nifka Apparently, or any person which reaches the level of Ela Atzilus, let's say when he does Shemona Esrei, so maybe you could say now he's standing in Atzilus. I mean, that's what all the Sidurim say. There's Tfilas Ha'asiyah, right? This is from the Mukobalim Sidurim, right? You got Tfilas Ha'asiyah, Tfilas Yitzir is in Chesed Gezimah, Tfilas Ha'priya is in the Krishma, and Tfilas Atzilus, so you're supposed to be standing in Atzilus while you're doing Shemona Esrei. But that's in Madreya through Avodah, but we're talking about the oil.
That's what we're trying to bring out in that paragraph, that Kilu, that Etzim doesn't belong here. In other words, that's why...
That's not the point he's trying to bring out. He's trying to bring out that there is a Hagbola in Atzilus. Atzilus is not all over the place. There is a Hagbola. Something was... The Kalim did something to Atzilus. It stopped it over here. It doesn't go below to Olam HaBriyah. Olam Sof is not stopped. It's just Behelam, because it's Bli Gvul. The Tzimtzum was Mailim over it, but it's here, just like Atmas is here. Olam Sof is here. But Atzilus is not.
So what does it mean, the Hagbola of the Eris of Atzilus?
What does it mean, the Hagbola of the?
Eris and Atzilus. That they have a seer?
They have a seer, and they're shaykhs to Gvul. They're shaykhs to Olam Atzilus now.
But still, without the Kalim, they would be mispashed bli Gvul. Meaning, the Hagbola is only in fact they have a certain seer.
Yeah, it's Magba, the Kalim are Magba.
Kalim Magba is pashtas, but the Hagbola and the Eris is mitzad that it has
in other words,
they
are Ein Sof. Atzilus is still Ein Sof, but it's on its level. On its level. It's Chochma, but it's Chochma Ein Sofis. It's Bina, and it's Bina Ein Sofis. But it's not Bina of all the Olamas. It's Bina of Atzilus, and Ein Sof on the level of Atzilus, not down here. Right, then in Perek Yud Gimel, he proves again that Oiris must themselves have a tzil. And what's the proof? From Achlifu Duchtayu. Right? What does Achlifu Duchtayu mean? That sometimes Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai swap. The Beis Shammai is Michoel and Beis Hillel is Machne. That's called that Kriya Chesed has in it Midas Oir HaGvura and Oir HaGvura B'Kriya Chesed. So how does that work? Practically speaking, how does that work?
Usually it's brought the other way around. The Achlifu comes mitzad the Bligbul.
Say again?
The Achlifu comes mitzad the Bligbul. It's brought as a Raya Faket.
Right. So here's where we have to sort of go on both ends at the same time. The fact that there could be Achlifu is because the Oir is Pshitas. Because if the Oir, let's go to a Shmai Vevtali, they said a Svara, and Beis Hillel came along and said, if that's the case, it's mutter, everything's fine. Came along Beis Shammai and said, no, if that's the case, so what's the mashal that's usually given? The famous pasuk, as a dugma for such a Svara that could be pulled either direction. It says that pasuk, or more or less those words, before the Mabul. It says, the Abish said, Vaynochem, why? The person has a bad Yitzhahara, get rid of him, wash him away. So we're going to bring a Mabul. Okay. What happened after the Mabul? No. I'll never do this again, we'll bring a Mabul. It's the same Svara, you put it this way, you put it that way, it depends. Before the Mabul it was pulled to Midas HaGvura. After the Mabul, so he changed it over and he pulled it the other way. So what is the Svara itself? A person has a Yitzhahara, therefore you should wash him away or you should allow him to live and have Rachmanas. Which one should you do? Both Svaras are legitimate. It depends if you see things with dark glasses or with light glasses. You're Baal Kvuras, and you're going to say, if that's the case, that's it. Or you're going to do it, be a Michoel, like Beis Hillel. So it all depends how you take it. The Svara itself is Pshitas, and therefore it can be pulled in either way. But is the Svara absolute Pshitas? Each one's passing the Chumrah. Let's try another Svara which is not like this Svara of Shmai Vatan. I'll give another Svara. In that side of the sky over there, there's a few million stars. No, so what's the pshat? Is he chayav or potter? What's one going to do with that? What's one going to do with the other? Well, the fact there's so many stars in that side has no impact on midas, whether it should be kosher or posel. Makes no difference. But if you come across this svara of the Yetzelev Hadam Ram in Urav, now it's a shaila. So should we deal with him, or should we punish him? Should we be nice to him or not punish him? That means the svara has to have a shaykhs to chesed and gvura. It must incorporate within itself both ideas, both chesed and gvura, and it just depends how you take it with your kelim. But the svara has to have a shaykhs to chesed and gvura. If you talk about something in Rukiya Shmini, that's nothing to do with chesed and gvura. So therefore, we're doing both. We're doing both things. We're saying it's pshitas legabe b'sham and b'silol, but it does have a shaykhus to b'sham b'silol. It has a shaykhus to chesed gvura. The same thing in the oil. The oil is pshitas legabe the kli. Yes, it's oil posh. It's bli ma. Oil sfiras esses bli ma. They have no tzil. They're pshitas. But legabe vos it is pshitas. Legabe which level is it's legabe the kelim that it's pshitas. But it's not pshitas legamri, and that's why if you pull it into kliya chesed, it will become chesed. If you pull it into kliya gvura, it will become gvura. That's the first thing he brings from Achlifa Duchtayu. that it's pshitas, and yet on the other hand, when they are pulled into the kli does make it seal in the oil. Not like the moshel of the mayim in the glass, that it remains pashut even when it's inside the glass. We're saying no. Once Beis Hillel understands this svara in a certain way, it's machayev him to say patim. And once Beis Shammai understands this svara in his way, it's going to be machayev him to be machmir. So how come sometimes Beis Shammai is mekel, Beis Hillel is machmir? This is to prove the point that it's pshitas. How could they possibly swap over if the oil is the same thing? If the mayim that's in the green glass is transferred to the mayim in the red glass, is that called achlifu dochtayu? It's the same mayim, it's pshitas. You can't say achlifu dochtayu, the mayim change places. It's just mamish the same thing. It's the same mayim. But when can you say achlifu dochtayu? When the svara, which is mechayev, goes into the keli, which is poiter, and the other way around, and Beis Hillel mitamol is going to be machmir, and Beis Shammai is going to be mekel. That's called achlifu dochtayu. That could only be if there is a tzil to change over. If there's no tzir, there's nothing changing. The water here is the same water as here. But if there is an oil which is now an oil hagvura, and it goes into the kliya chesed, it's an oil hagvura in kliya chesed. That means there is a tzir in the oil. Otherwise, the word achlifu wouldn't make sense. The question is, how comes Beis Shammai?
I didn't understand it.
If the oil in the kli remains pshitus, and smoker is pshitus, and inside the kli remains pshitas, it wouldn't make sense to say they're changing places. Because if you change the water from this keli to that keli, it's mamish the same thing. You can't say they change places. What changed? The svara of what changed into which svara? It's the same svara. Right? But if the svara, when it comes into one keli, becomes mitsuya according to that kli. In other words, the svara of Yetzilei V'Ramina Mina Urov makes Beis Shammai say, if that's the case, this person is bad, we have to get rid of him. And it makes Beis Hillel say, this guy's a Rahmanis, we've got to be kind to him. Now you can swap them over and say, Beis Shammai suddenly came around and came to understand that the svara is also the other way around, that even though I'm usually kind to people, that this guy's a bad person, I'm not going to be kind to him, I'm going to say he's kind. Beis Shammai is going to, and Beis Shammai the opposite. In other words, each one is going to see the other side of the svara. Only if there's a svara there can you say they change places. If the svara is the same, if the mayim is the same, there's nothing changing.
You're saying
It's not what?
Switching the svara over Yetzilei Adam from chesed to gvura is not achlifu dochtayu.
No, when it's already come down into Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, or into the chesed and gvura, and now the svara says that since he's Ra, therefore he is Ra, we've got to get rid of him. And then the same person who says that we have to get rid of him now understands that even though Rabbi Na'urav, that nevertheless we should be kind to him and let him live. That means the same Keli that understood till now, the Gvura of it, now understands the Chesed of it. That would be Achlifu Dochtayu. The Svara itself is mufshid, right? People are bad. People have Yetzer, so therefore, what should you do about it? Depends. Take it further, say, well, if he's bad, therefore, and therefore we have to get rid of him, we have to bring a mabul. So once you've brought it down to the level of saying, if that's the case, we have to be machmir on this person, and then you take that and swap it with the other svara and say, no, there's a reason to say that we should be mekel with him, that's called achlifu dochtayu.
How would that be different from if I put the water in the red cup, so now I see it's red?
That's only what you see, but the water is the same thing. You can't say now.
Well, the svara is also still the same svara.
It's not the same svara, that's what I'm trying to say. Once the svara came into the keli, it's changed according to the kli. The svara of Beis Shammai is now that you have to be machmir. And now Beis Shammai, who always see things as lechumra, is now saying, now I see that we have to be machmir.
But how does the svara change into the...
That's called achlifu dochtayu. Sometimes
No.
How does it work? Why should it change?
Why is when... Before the achlifu dochtayu, how does the svara get in its
Because
bed?
when it becomes down into the keli changes the svara according to the seer of the kli. Not like mayim. Mayim only looks on the outside like it's colored red, but it's not really red. If you look inside from the top, you'll see it's still mayim pshutim. But the svara did change when it came into the kli.
Why lechatchila is it mislavish in a specific keli?
Because usually that's how
if it has both tnuos of chesed and gvura, then so the since the earth is mitzuyer, it has a tnuos of chesed, mislavish in a kli of chesed. But if it has both, then how good for
So which part is each keli going to take? He's going to take what he sees in it. Like this svara, which is one svara. If you see it from a strict point of view, you're going to take it and use it against the person. And somebody who's a very kind person is going to take it and say, no, I see a reason to be Michoel. You take the svara into the kli then transforms the svara into its seal. Just like the koyach hariyah, that's the next one.
It's all taking the same R.
What's that?
It's all, every keli.
It's one oil, but it splits into two, depending on which keli it comes down to.
It's not
It doesn't remain. Well, no, it does. It changes. That's what he says. Changes.
It sounds like it changes only once it's Masavish and Kalim. Before it's Masavish and Kalim, it sounds like it's not necessary.
Before it's Masavish and Kalim, it has the potential for both. So it has two ways of looking at it. You can look at it this way, that way. Usually, Gvura will take one side, but in this case, Achlif Dochtai is Gvura will be able to see another side to it. So it's Nechla.
Is there a different marshal?
You understand it?
Yeah. More mamchish than Ayin?
What's that?
Is it possible to give a different marshal to be more mamchish?
A different marshal. Well, this is the marshal of the Rebbe say.
I'm missing something in it.
Just say, for example, let's say, maybe we'll come across it later on. Koyach hariyah will only go into the eye, and koyach hashmi will only go. If you can imagine that occasionally your ear is able to see, that would be achlifa dochtayu. But that wouldn't be impossible. Begashmis is impossible. But in this case, the keli is able to. That's why he says the example that when why do all of a sudden are they changing places? Why all of a sudden Bishamai is being nice and Bishil is being machmir? So he says because they go back a second time to the Rav. This is just a mashal, but what's he saying? Goes back a second time. Bishil went a second time to listen to what the Shmai V'Talim did. What does it mean? Second time? Means that the first time round they took everything as usual. Bishamai hears the svara and he says Naso, and Bishil says svara says muta. Coming a second time means that they are willing to go out of their tzil and hear another tzad. If you ever see an argument between people, right, they don't hear the other side. It's definitely like this, and you're not right. I'm right, right? And the other guy says the same thing. If he has a pnu of bittul and says, let's go through it again, then at some point, if he has that pnu of coming out of his usual way of thinking, he'll be able to see there's another tzad. He'll be able to, even though he himself remains b'chlolis b'shitase that everything has to be, let's say, gvura. B'shamai is always going to remain gvura, but he's able to see there's another tzad. And the question now is a practical question: is how comes whenever B'shamai decides to be Michoel, B'shil decides to be machmir? Was that an agreement between each other?
Because the way, that's the way I understood it, that based on the way the Rebbe explained that it's all about certain shita klolis. So if the prayer is mechoyach or mechriach, they're mechriach always opposites. So it's going to...
All the other times they're just masking, so there's no machlek.
That's what I'm going to say. The few times that it happens that they changed over, then we hear about it. But when they agreed, there's no machlek. Everybody agrees. It's not mentioned. That's a simple shit.
No, I'm saying every time that we see, whatever.
When we see that they argue and they swap, then it's a big deal. The Shammai is Michoel and this will be. But usually, most of the time, they agree. Hopefully. So the mashal of Achlifa Dochtayu is that we see both things. We see the pshitas of the oil, and the proof that it's pashut is it can swap over. On the other hand, legabe, they can't say it's pshitas legamri, it has no tzia, because what are they extracting from the svara? Either chesed or gvura. It's not a svara that's totally unremoved, something about Rakia Shminu. It has nothing to do with chesed or gvura. Has to be something that's shayches, but still pshitas legabe the kli. So it's bli ma legabe the kli. So after he brings the mashal of Achlifa Dochtayu, who says that from here we see three things. Number one, the oiras do change when they come into the keli. Number two, the shinuim is only in the oiras. And number three is that it's mitzab pshitas hasvara. Those are the three things in Perik Yud Gimel. Do you see where he's going? What's that?
After Bishamai understands Sefer Gvura, when he wants to switch to Chesed,
Till the air comes to his hand from Chesed, it's not Mitzuyah and Chesed. So you don't have air Chesed going from Kliyat Chesed to
right. So it doesn't actually. Begashmis, it sounds like you've taken the kli, you've poured this one over there, and you pour this one over there. That's a very gashmistic way of looking at it. Achlifa d'Chtai doesn't mean that they swapped in that respect. Achlifa means that Midas HaChesed, for example, Beis Hillel, who listened to the Svara a second time, and he heard at Sad Lahachmir, decided now to be Machmir. Didn't have to take it from Beis Shammai. He himself listened a second time. That means he came out of his tziyur and said, let me hear if there's another oimik to this which I didn't hear before. And then suddenly he says, yeah, you know what, I understand that there's a reason to be machmir. I think we're going to be machmir this way. And punkt to that, at the same time, Beis Shammai did the same thing, and he came to the opposite conclusion. It's not like Achlifa, that means he took the svara from here and brought it over there and made a swap. That's gashmius.
So it's not the Tzuyah and Ifn Chesed until he retired. Before he retired, before he makes it Tzuyah and Chesed, before Beis Shammai said Tzuyah Chesed, it was still Pashut.
It was Pashut.
In fact,
but it was Koil of both. It was Koil Chesed and Gvura.
Yeah.
And usually he extracts Gvura from it because he's Beis Shammai.
Yeah.
This time, all of a sudden, he went a second time, he listened a second time, and he managed to extract Chesed into him who's Gvura.
Why is there such a marshal that is Dafka? He first on this Beis Shammai first had a Gvura and then switched to Chesed.
It's not necessarily that he had a svara and he passed it this way and they decided to pass it differently. We find that Beis Shammai occasionally is Michoel. What happened over here?
That's the Rosh.
Yeah, he went out a second time. What does it mean a second time? That usually he hears immediately the tzad HaGvura. And this time he decided to come out of his tzio, so to speak, and hear another tzad. Is there another tzad? And he heard all of a sudden, yeah, you can be Michoel. Achlifa doesn't necessarily mean that he had to have an agreement with this Hillel to swap. It just worked out like that. That as a point, this machlekes, Beis Shammai heard the other tzad, and Beis Hillel also heard the other tzad.
So
in other words,
Beis Shammai spelled with marshal. At first, Beis Shammai understood it from Buddha, and then he heard it from his job the second time. It's Lav Dafka. It could have been.
Yeah, I don't know if it's maybe it is Dafka. I don't know. But it could be it was Dafka. He came a second time. They came to this one a second time. He talks about the Ma'aseh B'negei Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, or he's just taking Bichlal. I don't think he's talking about Beis Shammai Beis Hillel necessarily. He says K'shemeh the second time is to be mamchish. How could that possibly be? The Beis Shammai, who always has his dark glasses on every time he's machmir, all of a sudden now what happened? It means we have to find a hechatimtza. Why would he see things differently now? So we say, first time is what's normal. The second time, if he listens to it, a second time he gets to hear another tzad.
So when we speak about this,
Some interesting with Michoel, which I saw in I think Chitrik's Rishimis. He says that when the Rebbe Rashab took over the Nasias, so Rebbe Zalman Aaron, his older brother, was also there. So right at the beginning, there was a few Chacham that decided they're going to ask both the same question. So one guy went into the Razor and said, should I do this or should I do that? So he said, do Aleph. He went then into the Rebbe Rashab and he said, no, first he went to the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Rashab said you should do Aleph. He went then into the Razor and he said, what should I do? He said, Beis. So he said, but your brother said Aleph. He said, yeah, wir haben abgerät und wir sagen verkehrt. He made this agreement to do opposites. So I don't think there was an upgrade they're going to ask him, it just means that occasionally there's a yitzia from the Hagdara.
let's look at Gosh that first understood it in Ephraim Chassid, then when he hears it a second time, then it becomes right. Before he heard it a second time, it's impossible the other way.
Okay, fine. I understand a second time meaning that sometimes he goes out of his tziyur. Could be the first time, the second time, the third time. I don't think it makes a difference how many times. When he's able to hear another tzad, even though be'etzem he remains midas hakvura. Right?
So the air is pashut or not pashut?
Be'etzem it's pashut.
Not Eir HaSeichel now. I'm saying when you talk about Achlifa d'Chtayu. So we're trying to say that there's Akbal of Chesed v'Gvura and all its spheres in the air.
Yeah.
But it's still Kail all the. So is the air a Chesed or is the air of all the spheres, and when it comes into Kliyat Chesed it becomes Chesed?
So in the end you're going to have to say that it's all of spheres, but that means it's Kail Dafke Es. In other words, in this oil if you go all the way back to the Shoresh, is going to be an Oir Echad which has 10 inyonim incorporated in it. And each one comes out to the right Kli.
So how did Eser Eres B'Kli Echad? It's one Eir which includes Eser details.
No, that's the vote. It's Eser inyonim. There's 10 inyonim there.
Without a Keli.
Without Kli.
But I thought that the Keli is what makes it into a...
No, that's what we're saying. There is 10 inyonim.
But that's
there.
what we said here just now. The Achlifat Uchtayos is through it establishing the Keli
So
and being a
Kia,
Kia.
say in the Svara of Shema V'Avtalin, how many Svaras are there? There's only really one Svara. They only said one Shir, whatever they said. They said one Psak, one Svara. But Be'emes, that Svara is Kedel 2. So there's 2 Svaras there in one. Achas Shu Shtayim.
Yeah.
Be'emes, that's how all Londis works. How do, I don't know what the Magdashim do here do, but usually what do? You find the Machlekes HaRishonim, and you say, what's his Svara, what's his Svara? And then you come to one Nakud, you say, because of this Svara, you could see 2 sides to this one coin, and he held the Shitose this way, and he held the Shitose.
But I'm saying the Glidumaya happens through its being established in the Keli, not beforehand.
Okay.
But here you're saying that there's Eser Eres B'Kli Echad, it's already stands separate.
It's not separate mamish. It's in Kli Echad, it's not separate mamish. I'm saying, inside there's Eser.
But it's not one Eir.
There's 10 Eiris, but they're all together. They're Kli Echad. Okay, I think we're sort of over time now, so we'll have to do the other half. After all, it was the second time, so we'll do. We'll get down next time.
So this let me understand
What's that?
that in order for them for the Achlifat Uchtayah to happen is when they Sheshemeh the second time, when they leave their seers, it's coming inside the Tanur of Bittul. So it's inside the Tanur of Blikvul. It means inside the Tanur of Blikvul that the Achlifat Uchtayah could happen.
What do you mean? I wouldn't say Blikvul, I would say Fakir. Inside the Pshitas they could change.
I'm saying Mevchenas HaKelim, in order for the Achlifat Uchtayah to happen, Shammai Hill, they had to come here a second time and be prepared to hear the Svara, not according to them. So it's a Tanur of Bittul. So is that not a Tanur of Blikvul?
No, it's not going to be.
Saying of Pshitus, of Pshitus.
The oil is posh. That shows that the oil has Pshitus and is not restricted to this way or that way. That means the oil before it's mislabish is poshet. But it's only Pshitus Megabe the Kegel. It's not Pshitus Be'etzim, because then it would be like a Svara about the Kiyah Shmini, which means nothing. Going to get as far as Chesed and Gvura. The Svara is something which can either be pulled into Chesed or into Gvura. It means it's Kedel both stuff. But because it's an oil poshet, it's Kedel both. And depending on you can take which side you want from this.
Meaning, so Mitzad itself it's Mitzuyer because it could be interpreted in different ways. Mitzad the Kelim it's Pashut because Man Bekeli doesn't take it in. It's not
Mugdi yet.
It's not Mugdi. So in other words, the fact that it could be translated in this way is the Akbala, is Mitzuyer Mitzad the Erd, and this that Mamish it isn't yet is the Shittas Mitzad the Kli.
Shittas Megabe.
If Atzilus is Taka its own gather and Taka's no Shech, why do we need Kelim in order to be Makbul in Atzilus? In other words, if there's no different realities, we're saying that Atzilus.
Maybe it is, but it sounds like a simple question.
If it wouldn't be Kelim, what would be? Everything would be
realize that.
I'm sure it is.
It's like saying somebody
how does he
who
explain
lives in Olam HaSeich,
Maybe like what you're
and
saying.
not in Olam HaMidrash, is born in this level of Seich.
You understand what
He's
I'm
only in Olam HaSeich. He lives Olam HaSeich.
Because in other words, because our Ashavas comes from there. So therefore, in order to get someone else, you need to have.
That's one you're going to have to stop.
And
The
therefore, you
truth
need to have
is,
separate
every
Kelim.
sphere is like that. It's not just that sphere. Every single sphere is like that. In order for Binah to come along, you have to stop Chachma. It's called B'derech Kla. It's called Mati v'Loi Mati. There has to be Loi Mati Chachma and then Mati Binah. There has to be a pullback to allow for the next one, and then a pullback of that to allow for the next one. If a person is behispilus, it says the Lashon sometimes, a person can't be overexcited when he learns. overexcited meaning he's wild. He can't be wild when he's low. He has to calm down, otherwise his mind won't work, because his rotzen or whatever that is, is blocking his mind from working. If you get too excited, you won't be able to. So you have to calm down, and then your mind can work. If your mind is working, then maybe your midas will work. So somebody's only in seichel, you have to somehow schlep the seichel down into midas, and then from then into ma'aser. If somebody's all theory and no ma'aser, that means he's living in olam seichel. He doesn't know how to bring it down to ma'aser. There has to be some point where you say ad kan seichel. Now let's go down to midas, and now let's go down to ma'aser. It's al derech zeh. Atzilus is the olam of chochma. Chochma ilah mekanana. Batzilus, right? So it's an olam where everything there is chochma. If you have only that, you'll never get to olam habriya. So you have to make a stop, and then you can have briya.
Right. And if not for kelim, it'll talk be begili there, not just So okay, but it doesn't.
So that shows that there is some type of hagbala in Atzilus. It's not like Oir and Sof, that no keli can contain Oir and Sof. There's no keli we can say is going to be magbal Oir and Sof to allow for a little bit to go further down. Oir and Sof is Ein Sof. It's everywhere. You don't see that's because there was a hell, but it's everywhere.
Okay, and to say that it's just a symptom between Atzilus and then that would be enough, and you don't need Golomb. That doesn't make sense either, because then Atzilus wouldn't function, and then therefore Ilmis would be different.
You wouldn't be able to create. You have to create
something specific with the tzir. So that's all besides
I'm not saying for definite that one should say Atzilus is not here, but based on what it says here, it sounds more correct to say Atzilus is in Atzilus and Olam Asiyah is in Olam Asiyah. He's not here. Of course, if somebody learns with Bittul ben Atziyah, somebody davens and he's a tzaddik, and when he stands Shemona Esrei, he doesn't feel himself, then you can say he's standing in Atzilus. That's been said Avidasa. His neshama is margish or not margish. He's at the level of Atzilus, right? Let's say the Baal Shem Tov wrote the letter. You know the Ma'aser with the letter, the 15 years later. You know the Ma'aser of the Baal Shem Tov? The Ma'aser of the Baal Shem Tov, you have to know. The Ma'aser of a rich man came to the Baal Shem Tov just to meet him, and the Baal Shem Tov said, "Could you do me a favor? On the way back, could you make a detour around this town? I don't remember the name of the town, Lemberg or one of the places. Could you stop there and deliver a letter for me?" He said, "Sure, Baal Shem Tov will do anything." Baal Shem Tov wrote out a letter, signed it, sealed it, and put on the front, "This is to be delivered to Reb Tzaddik, the Rosh Ha'ir." You know the story?
I think he asked him for a certain amount of
He forgot the letter in his pocket for 15 years. 15 years later, by that time he'd lost his whole business and he was poor. And he was looking for leftover coins, maybe find something in his pocket. He went looking through his pocket and suddenly finds this letter. He says, "Oi, that's why, because I didn't do what the Baal Shem Tov asked me 15 years ago, that's why I lost all my money." So he says, "At least, better late than never. Hope the guy's still alive." And he runs to wherever this town was and he's saying, "Where is Reb Tzaddik?" Anybody know? He said, "Reb Tzaddik? He just was elected as the Rosh Ha'ir." And he's run to him, he says, "Here's the letter." He says, "The Baal Shem Tov sent me a letter. The Baal Shem Tov was already nostalgic. He sent a letter for now." "I'm sorry, it was 15 years late." But he said, "But how could it be 15 years late?" It says, "Reb Tzaddik Rosh Ha'ir, I was just elected." So he said, "Okay, let me see it." He thought it was a scam. Lots of elections are scams, right? So he opens up the letter and he sees the letter and it says, Kvod Harav Tzaddik Rosh Ha'ir, with the date, the present, that day's date. He says, I'm asking you, this person standing in front of you used to be a rich man. Is Yard Min Achosav. Please help him find a job which will help him get back on his feet. And if you don't believe, in order to be ma'asher that this is a true letter, as soon as you finish reading the letter, you will be nispasa with a basura teva that your wife just gave birth to a baby, the baby's boy. As he finished the letter, somebody came running. "Reb Tzaddik, did you hear the good news? Your wife just gave birth." So I knew it was a Baal Shem Tov Ma'aser. So he was makabel and he had the guy. Now what happened? When was the letter written? 15 years earlier. So Tzemach Tzedek brings this Ma'aser down in the Bech Tzitz, and he doesn't explain like Ruach HaKodesh. He says, the Baal Shem Tov was then standing in Olam HaYitzira. In Yitzira's 15 years is a minute. So when he was in Yitzira, it was now. Reb Tzaddik is now the Rosh Ha'ir, he's writing out the letter, it's now. For this person to reach the time when it's necessary, it had to go through 15 years. But for the Baal Shem Tov, it was now, because it was 15 years ahead. Because he was then in Olam HaYitzira. So you see, time changes of which olam it is. How did we get into this? I've forgotten. It's a nice story. Right?
I don't know. I
heard that
didn't get the
You're saying about Atzilus being here and not here.
I'll tell stories.
Is Atzilus here and not here?
Someone being in
It's a different
Atzilus.
reality of here.
Someone being in Atzilus, idea of how he does it, like if he's davening.
If you want?
Someone being in Atzilus.
Yeah.
That's how you.
Davening.
Yeah.
So,
That's why you mentioned the story.
Thank you.
But
How's that Pardes going to explain himself? It's a punch of the shadow on the Pardes. What is he?
What's the part say again?
Is a punch of the shadow on the Pardes. Why is one arm establishing why is there a ches establishing the ches? That's what we asked in the Pardes.
According to the part, this would be a problem. We don't have
Say, how does he explain himself anywhere? Like, does it explain everywhere?
Mitzvah get into it?
I think we use the motion of the Pardes when we need it.
Right, I'm saying it's almost like a klotz kasha.
Like, how does he explain after the Tayo?
How does he explain the shadow without a klotz style? How does he explain that one urgent establishing specifically?
So, I don't know. I don't know how the Pardes would do it. The truth is, the Pardes himself, if I'm not mistaken, the steerers in the Pardes himself, what exactly he holds. From the moshel of the Mayim, it sounds like he holds the Oris of Pshutim. But from other places, it's mashma that he holds.
It sounds like the ikam difference with the Pardes is the Pardes holds that even after the urgent establishing the kiyah, it stays pashut.
Yeah.
But before that, it sounds like it's pretty similar. What we're saying.
Well, if he holds
Or you
even
can
after,
definitely explain the Pardes when he says pashut. It's definitely top shit to the ur before it's establishing the kiyah.
the fact that it's pashut before it comes in is obvious, but the question is, how much pashut? Is it pshitas as in Mayim Pshutim that has absolutely no tziyah? Or is it like we're learning here that it's only pshitas agabe the tziyah of the kli?
I'm saying, if all, I don't know what the Lashon Pardes is, but all he says is that the ur is pashut. It's not such a steer to what we're learning. Besides for the fact that once it's established in the keli, it stays.
Besides for what?
Once it's established in the keli, if it stays pshitas, that's the ikar difference.
Yeah, that's good.
What about the Maggid piece of a table? She was able to tell that the one who made it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So look at you do have from that person in the table.
Therefore,
So the extent saying that Atzilus and saying since
I'm not saying that nothing of Atzilus comes through.
the Olam is in here, only Ha'ara.
Atzilus is an Olam, yeah. The Ha'ara comes down, obviously it comes down. You can't have Biyah without Ha'ara of Atzilus, otherwise you won't have any Keich Lekitiv in the Ha'ara. That's Maamoris of Atzilus, Nivra Ha'olam.
When I heard the word about Atzilus being here, I think it was only in order to point out that Atzilus isn't like, Gash was taking place. It wasn't in order to say that like it's Mamish.
Okay, fine.
Also, we're talking about the areas not as they are necessary as Moses or the Svaras Haraf himself. We're talking about the Svaras as they are.
So again, I didn't hear you.
There's Ar Ma'amrikia or Etzes Ganotzes, the Ar, and then the Ar as Misash and the Kli, right? When we talk about Chilifat Chetay, we're talking about the second Arka, which is already somewhat Matsuri, although Pashut at the same time, but part Muktar in Ar Chachma or Chesed, as opposed to Gvura. And the third point that Rabbi Chaim explains is that it's Ayidei Svaras Harav. The way it's Chilifat Chetay is that the Svara is Nichlal back in Svaras Harav and then it's Read Hemshech otherwise.
I don't think it has to be Nichlal, it's the fact that the Svaras Harav is Pashut, the Gabi the Kli, that's why you can see both Svaras coming from that one Svaras Harav.
But we're not talking about the Svara of Chachma or of Chesed switching over to Gvur. You're just seeing a different part of the Svaras Harav.
The Kli all of a sudden is a different type of oil and extracts a different type of psak. And usually Gvura will only take this Svaras. Gvura, all of a sudden now, he hears another tzad.
But then it sounds more like big man, like we're talking about Hemshech from the Svaras Harav and new Hemshech from the Svaras Harav, as opposed to the original Ar. That was
as opposed to
the Ar as it was already in the state of Mayim, the Ar Atzilus before it's Misash and the Kli. We're talking already about taking just a different factor from this.
So that's what I was trying to tell him. It doesn't mean you have to take the oil out from here.
No. I'm saying if you're not doing that, you're only being about taking this far from the Shor Sarav, then it's not the Chayach Lifat Techtayim, it's at the Urs of Chesed Gvura. You're just being Mamshech Gvura the Mashpia. But then it's the Chayach that's not even a Lifat Techtayim so much anymore. It's at the Urs themselves. Talk about Shor Sarav itself. It's already.
Right, but the achlifu is that the keli that should normally take one way is taken another way. So it's nechlaf, his oil.
So achlifu is about the kelim, not about the.
It's because of the oil. That's why the keli can see another.
But the etzem achlifu is going is on the kelim.
The oil is changing. The keli always remains the same. Okay,
I now he's being Michoel.
It's mitzad that the kli has also mitzad. He brings in brackets that the keli also has a shtikl iskavalus. There is chesed shtikl b'gvura, so he has the potential to hear the tzad hachesed as well.
And
in other words,
that could be what shines for.
If somebody like Bishama would be closed-minded to only gvura, then he would never hear another tzad. The fact that he is in gvura himself, he has chesed gvura, and all the spheres should be gvura. Therefore, there's a tzad in him which allows. It's possible to see the tzad of chesed.
So it's only kelim of tikkun, not of teyu, and andere weiter. Kelim of teyu can be such a.
Right. Exactly. I was going to say that. Keli of teyu would not probably not be shaykh being in the bachif of teyu. If he's a kli, that's it. There's no two ways about it. But somebody who's tikkun, he has more possibility to see another tzad.